quite yet. Oh, now we are.
I like that move.
I don't even know if anyone can see us.
Maybe no one wants to.
I know no one wants. They're like, it's too irreverent. I feel like it's just too irreverent today. If anything, it's the most reverent.
It is the most reverent.
The most reverent we've ever been on this episode.
It's a whole new style of reverence tonight.
Yes. Well, everybody, Caitlin.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Import Taste. I thought Britt was starting. I confused it. It was my fault. I'm starting.
It's my fault. I started doing it. I'm just so excited to get this episode started.
If you were looking for church, you found it. So
yes.
Welcome.
The Church of Wine. We're right here for it.
So we are Import Taste, an irreverent guide to drinking wine. We are super excited to have you here, and we will get around to wine in a little bit. But Britt, why don't you tell us what we're doing here?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I mean, what we're doing here right now, or what we're doing here, like, well, I'll just tell you what our goal is and why we started this. Don't let the habits fool you. Our goal is to demystify wine, to make it accessible for people to share our love with wine with other people and our love with each other. We're two best friends that we started this show because we've been missing each other. I live in San Francisco. She lives in San Diego. We don't get to see each other that often. And we are trying to, especially during COVID time, it was just like, I'm at home drinking alone. She's at home drinking alone. Mm-hmm. Let's be at home and drinking alone together. And we wanted to invite everybody else to join in on that with us. So that's why we're here. We also want to make people I seriously love wine, but I also don't want to take it too serious. Obviously, I'm dressed like a nun today. So I just want you all to know that it's okay to come at any state that you are of learning wine to this show. That's what we're here for. We're here to make wine fun. We're here to make wine interesting. And we're here to get a little irreverent about it. And I feel like we might be smited by the end of this episode. Let's hope not.
So before I introduce our topic for this evening, I would like to open up our episode with a word of prayer. Oh. Nope, just kidding. Nope, don't have a prayer for you. We're talking about religious wines tonight. So if you didn't get the hint from the Bible and the
Wait, you don't dress like this on the regular? Like, I had this at home.
Although I am really proud, Britt made her own costume. I am not that talented.
I did. So everyone, in case you were wondering, this used to be a turtleneck that I cut. And then I sewed the bottom into my little thing. And I had this laying around the house. I sew. Beyond drinking, I also sew. And
woman of many talents.
Woman of many talents. Many God-given talents.
Praise Jesus.
Yeah. And this costume cost me about $3. So.
And it looks so good on you. I love it. It looks so good.
I mean, maybe I missed my true calling of the nunnery that I should be a part of, but here I am today with all of you, sharing the good news of wine.
Yeah.
But what we would also like to invite everyone to do is open up your bottles at home, get drinking. I'm going to tell you about what I'm drinking, but also we'd love to hear from you in the comments. We want to bring up people's comments in the show. We'd love to address them. If you just want to say how awesome our costumes are, we want to hear it. If you are at home dressed as a priest or something, maybe a priest is tuning in. I hope so. God, I hope so. Anyway,
Lord's name in vain.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know. That's why I said I might be smited by the end of this episode. So let me tell you about this lovely wine. So when I went to the wine shop, it's so funny because we made a list of what to drink. And And I'm not even drinking one of the ones that I brought, but this story was so interesting. I had to bring it instead. So I actually bought 2 wines and I had a hard time choosing. But the good news is I'm drinking a white and you're drinking a red. And we both would have been drinking reds if I drank the other one that I was bringing. But anyway, so I was at the wine shop looking for a La Crema Christi, which means the tears of Christ, which we'll talk about later. And I asked the wine person to show me where it was and they couldn't find it. And so I was like, well, I'll be taking suggestions for other religious wines if you've got ideas. So he told me about this one and maybe we could bring up that lovely slide. There it is. So it is a wine gut enriched cannoli. And I feel like I'm on like Austrian kick lately. So it is Austrian again. I'm like, wow. But it was such a great story about who they have on their labels. And the labels are just so beautiful. So if you ever see this label, you should get it because they make some pretty spectacular wine. Let me just tell you about Emmerich first before I get into the cool label. So he's a 3rd generation winemaker. It's a family owned winery. All the wines are hand harvested. This one is a Traminer, which, I mean, we could talk about that, or we did talk about that. One of my favorite grapes, the Sauvignon. But if it's a rosé, if it's a like rosé Traminer, it's a Gewürztraminer. But if it's, or an aromatic Traminer, but if it's not, if it's a Blanc Traminer, that means it's a Sauvignon. So I was trying really hard to find out, and I'm really hoping it's a 17, but I don't know. The guy talked me into it. I took it. But it's done with skin contact, whole cluster grapes. It goes through no malolactic fermentation. And if you've been tuning in, malolactic kind of gives it those creamy notes. So it does not get there. So it's going to be more like bright green apple notes. It's been 6 to 8 months on the lees. So now let's talk about that cool guy who's on the cover. He is Saint Urban of Langres. Perfect. He was a French bishop in 327 AD. And when he first took his role, political turmoil broke out right after he took the job. So he fled from his persecutors into a vineyard. And the vineyard dressers helped conceal him. And he used this as an opportunity to convert them to Christianity. So he moved from town to town, conducting like a covert ministry and using the vineyards as the way that he would move from town to town. And so he like grew such an affinity for the people who worked in the vineyards and stuff like that. He is considered the patron saint of vineyards and wine industry workers, which I think is really cool. And when people pray to him, they pray to him against blight. So that's when kind of your vines get damaged. And they pray to him against alcoholism. He has his feast day is either April 2nd or January 23rd. And that really probably depends on which part of the hemisphere you lie in, because it's always like kind of like spring right before harvest starts. So you pray to him for how the season's weather is going to be. So anyway, super cool. That's why I'm so excited about him. I'm like, I didn't even know that. And I have drinking these wines and I love these wines. So I'm like, now if you don't know, now you know.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, to drop all the knowledge.
Okay, Caitlin, what are you drinking?
Okay, so I am drinking, I think I have a better picture on there somewhere, but it is a Mission wine from Brock Cellars. And actually, even though you had the same perception I had of this wine, which was that it was a red, but when I was reading it, I learned it was a rosé. So it's very dark.
It looks like a light-bodied red to me.
That's what I was thinking.
Dark-bodied rosé.
Yep, exactly. And so it's very funny because I picked it out from the wine shop. I don't really have a great story except for that I was looking for a wine and I went to one of my favorite shops to get wines from for this show. And the guy who was helping me out, I had not met him before. And so I came in with a list of all these different ones I wanted for all these different episodes. Like, okay, I want one from Argentina. I need a, I don't know, whatever, like a Chilbel Red, whatever. And then I was like, oh yeah, the last request is I need a wine that's affiliated with religion. And he's like, oh, that might be the weirdest request I have ever gotten so far. So I laughed about that. But then I had a few options and I went with this one, which I will say I definitely did think was a red. It's the mission grape, it's Pais is the grape, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. So I don't want to go into it too much. It is, the grapes are grown in Lodi and they're made in Berkeley. Britt knows a little bit about this because she's been working with Brock Cellars up in Berkeley this year for harvest. Mm-hmm. So you might know more about this wine than I do, but feel free to intervene if you have anything to say.
I didn't study it. Other than I know what the mission grape is, and I know how their cellar practices are, all like native yeasts. Mm-hmm. They do a lot of carbonic or partial carbonic. Great, yeah. So because of that, it's really gentle on the grapes, and like if you tuned in before, and we'll definitely talk about it next week. So tune in next week. But carbonic is when the fermentation happens inside the grapes rather than like they're crushed and it's happening with all the juice. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and then I think you brought this up, I think last week, but I was reading that they do all foot crushing too, I think. And so
typically when I did it the other day, we did it like right before it went into press. Like we crushed all the grapes to like kind of get them ready to go into the pneumatic press. And then certain varieties, they will foot tread. They do a lot of pump overs also.
Okay.
And so I was the pump over punch down queen. I would only go from 6 a.m. till 9 a.m. in the morning. So that's a very limited amount of the scale that they do. I'm like, the mission grape wasn't on my list of pump overs.
Yeah. Well, this one was only 121 cases made. It's a 2018. It's the first year they made it as a rosé too, which is kind of interesting. And I have to say, I had not had this wine before, and it is like probably the nattiest wine I've drank on this show.
Really?
It's weird. It's got like a very bitter aftertaste to it, like a grapefruit or something, where you get that like aftertaste. It tastes like kombucha to me.
Yeah.
And I usually I'm pretty on board with it, and I'm on board with this one. It's just like, it surprised me a lot. I wasn't expecting it. So I was like, whoa. And I didn't expect it to be a rosé either. So clearly I'm being schooled.
I mean, I think that rosés and light-bodied reds, they just dance the line of each other. It's like, okay, one person's going to call it that, one person's going to call it this. Unless it's made in like the Saunier method, I feel like it's probably, it could be a red or a rosé, depending on how long you leave it.
Sorry, Harper has a lot of opinions about reds and rosés.
Yeah, he's like, fuck that red or fuck that rosé.
Yeah, he's like, let me tell you what I think about the fine line between reds and rosés. So yeah, I'm pretty interested in drinking it. It's really fun. But
mine has some RS to it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's like 7 grams per liter, which isn't a lot, but definitely has a richness in its mouth. It has, I can't remember what grape this is. So now I'm like wondering if it is a Gewürztraminer, but it has a very grapey smell to it, which I know is a funny thing, but there are certain varieties that have grapey smells to them. And I'm like, it kind of smells grapey to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so we have prepared a really fun and exciting agenda for you today, starting with some ancient wines that related to religion. So, Britt.
Yes. So and I mean, and who's here to start it off? It's Jesus.
I love this.
In the water, getting that wine, turning water into wine, and he's doing it one fist at a time.
That's so good. I love that picture.
I love that. So there was this person on our Instagram account who we put in all of the wines that we recommended for people to get today, and they were like, "Thou shalt not leave my wine off this list." And so then I went down a rabbit hole and I was like, okay, who is this person? Sometimes I'll just like go and like look at people. And so then they make some funny wines. I brought one picture up. Everybody's Ins. I mean, you gotta love that.
Oh my gosh, that's great. From JC Winemaker, is that what it says?
JC Winemaker is the winemaker. So I mean, it was really funny. But anyway, I went on their Instagram and I found that hilarious piece of art, and I was like, we have to have this on the show.
So good, I love it.
So anyway, I'm going to start us off talking about ancient kind of religions and the wines that came out of ancient religions. So, oh man, I kind of love ancient religions. Let me just talk to everybody a little bit. I read this book called the alphabet versus the goddess. And it was kind of like basically before we had like written language and shit like that, goddesses were more like present. And then once we started like writing and then, you know, men took over, then it became gods. It became very male oriented, but it used to be very goddess oriented. So anyway, let's start off with goddess Hathor, whatever you want to call her, the Egyptian goddess of wine. So she's great. I love in the notes, I wrote it down too. So I was so glad when you wrote it down. She has a day of intoxication, which happens once a month. And we have a day of intoxication. It happens once a week. You're all here for it. So just so you know, this is the celebration. This is our day of intoxication. I hope that you are here for it. But I love that a lot of like gods have their festivals like once a year, things like that. But nope, the goddess of wine, she has it once a month. I'm like, hell yeah, you do, girl. She also, so other things that she was the goddess of was music, dancing, joy, and love. And it's so funny because I feel like that's like our episode. Yeah. I'm like, okay, music, check. Dancing, check. Joy, check. Love, yes. So I'm like, oh my gosh, she's like all of the best things about our episode. I'm like, maybe we should like get a tattoo of Hathor. I don't know. What do you?
She's like our spirit animal, I feel.
Exactly. Like our spirit goddess.
Yeah. I love it.
I couldn't think of a name for this episode, but I should have done it wine and spirits, like Martin recommended. Would have been great. Oh, there he is. Perfect.
Here.
And then one more thing, just started a watch party. Yay. Yay. I know. I hope they love this theme too. I hope they're not offended by us. One other thing that she is also known as is the mistress of the vagina. When I read that, I was like, oh my God.
So she's really seriously like our spirit.
I know. All of like her like attendants, basically like the priestesses who were dedicated to her, were practiced in the art of lovemaking. I was like, okay.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah. So anyway, so Hathor, like OG. Yeah, that's once a month. Yeah, probably. Maybe, yeah. Goddess of the vagina, bleeding once a month, party once a month. I see it. I see what you got there, Logan Struck. So now let's move on from that lovely goddess to the Greek god of wine, Dionysus. I love that he was described as having a dual nature. So when Dionysus came and visited you, it was either he brought joy and ecstasy, or he brought brutal and blinding rage. And it was supposed to represent the dual nature of wine. And like when you drink it, I was like, okay. It was really interesting too. He has a really cool story. Like, okay, so he's the only god that was born of a mortal. And what happened was Zeus is his dad. I think his mom's name is like Semele. Anyway, she's pregnant. Zeus is in love with her. Duh. And then Zeus's wife Hera is like, hell no, girl. And so she goes to the mortal and says, oh, you know what you should do? Because the mortal didn't know who she was sleeping with, but she knew she was sleeping with a god, but she didn't know who. She was like, you should ask him to show you his true self. And so right before they're about to have sex, she's like, hey, I know you love me. Like, I'm going to sleep with you, but I need you to promise that you'll give me this promise after and you'll reveal yourself to me. And she like made him swear on something. And so he was like, and then when he found out what it was a big bummer because he loved her, but he knew once he showed himself to her, and she's pregnant, by the way, at this point. Once he showed himself to her, that she would be like incinerated. And so he did. She died. And what he did is he took their little fetus and he sewed it into his thigh and he birthed Dionysus himself out of his own thigh. And that is actually why he got god status, where anyone who's born of a god and a mortal wouldn't. So anyway, and then Rhea, or I want to say Hera, was like still super jealous of this this guy Dionysus, because like, oh, it just reminded her of all this stuff. Like it reminded her of all like her husband's infidelity, and so she like paid the Titans to dismember him. And then Rhea brought him back to life and like kind of like resurrected him. And so that's supposed to represent the vines, how they die every season and then they come back to life, and how you have to really prune vines and so that they can go dormant. And then Bacchus is the Roman god of wine, and he's basically like just Dionysus, but the Roman version as opposed to the Greek version. So almost the exact same story. But what's interesting about him is he traveled the world as a god before he was let into the heavens, and he showed mortals how to grow vines. And what's really, I think, interesting is that you can see how specific holidays in the ancient world followed the cycle of the vines and of grape growing, and just to see how important grape growing was in the ancient times and how it was with, like, you know, with religion. And so that's ancient religions. They love wine. Caitlin, maybe you can tell us about how Jesus plays a part in this whole story.
Yeah. So I feel like you got the really fun section because most people already know about, like,
I don't know if you noticed, but I just assigned who got what section.
You're more fun than me. Is that what you're saying?
No, I honestly didn't. I was just like, oh, Caitlin probably would be, I thought you would be better at the Jesus section. So I was like,
oh, I'm going to kill it.
For the Jesus section, I'm like, I hadn't even researched the ancient wines one until I like went deep down that hole. I was like, oh yeah, I can make this fun.
Don't worry. I'm going to kill the Jesus section. Not like that. Came out totally.
He's gonna kill it and then resurrect it after 3 days.
I was like, I did not mean for it to be that pun. Okay. Couple things. I mean, most people know that there are lots of references to wine in the Bible. And I think it's interesting because a lot of times people don't think about the Bible as being set in a certain time. And really, it was set in a time of like Greeks, and all of this mythology that Britt's talking about has a big influence on a lot of things. I learned that in Bible college. So there is a lot of influence between those two areas. Okay.
So before you kill this section, Martin says, no pressure. Remember, Mexico is watching.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have some really good news for Mexico in a few parts from now, but not yet. So this was a tidbit that I really loved because it's pretty much the Jesus culture is like in Mediterranean culture, and they viewed wine not as a luxury, but as a staple of life, which I love thinking about because I feel like I view it as a staple of life. And I just think it's nice to remember that there's an ancient precedent for that. So keep that in mind. Throughout the Bible, I've been reading tons and tons of Bible verses about wine in the last few days.
Getting ready for this episode.
Yes. And they generally fall into a couple different camps. So one major camp, which you're probably familiar with, is the like, do not be drunk on wine and have orgies and be doing debaucherous things. I don't know if debaucherous is a word, but you get the point. So
I'm sure it's what the mistress of the vagina was doing, if you were wondering what debaucherous things are.
Yeah. So there's that camp, and that's a camp that we see a lot of today in like a lot of modern religions, where it's like wine equals maybe not such great outcomes. And then there was also this really heavy presence of wine in the Bible about, it kind of came and went as God's blessings and God's punishment. So you see throughout the Old Testament that God is, the Bible is constantly talking about when God is rewarding people for being faithful to him, he will give them fruits and wine and abundance of crop, an abundance of vineyards, abundance of wine. So a lot of it centers around feasts where there's tons of food, they even use the terms like rich food and wine flowing abundantly. So you see this as a reward throughout scripture. And then on the flip side, when there is a punishment involved, you see that those things are being taken away. So you are going to be without the abundance of wine, or you like, it's kind of a God's punishment is to take those things away from you.
That would be a punishment in my life. I mean, let's be real honest.
Well, and if you think about it too, like the way that we understand, first of all, you can't make wine as like a nomadic community. So you have to make wine when you're like stationed someplace. Like that's another thing about how the history of these beverages throughout human existence is based on being kind of settled somewhere. And so wine is inextricably linked to other crops being productive. So if the soil is good, then you're probably going to be getting good crops. And that's just, you can't really leave you can't really separate those two things. And then we have, so wine is a sign of God's blessing in the Old Testament, and lack of it is a punishment. There's so many verses, I wrote down so many, and Isaiah 24:6 is one where you see God say exactly that. And then also, we know that Jesus's first miracle, which Britt talked about on our Instagram, was turning water into wine at a wedding. And that's where people were like coming to him. They knew that he had powers that were beyond what their powers were. And they were like, hey, look, we're supposed to be at this celebration. And okay, every man serves the good wine first. Yeah. And when men have drunk freely, then that which is poorer, you have kept the good wine until now. So this is basically in response to Jesus's first miracle, where he turns this water into wine at a wedding based on them kind of begging him, like, please, we're out of wine. How can we go on and celebrate this wedding if we have run out of wine? And
obviously you can't once you run out of wine at a wedding, time to go to the bar. Bye.
Yeah, exactly.
Wedding. See you later.
Exactly. And so the interesting thing about the verse that just came up was that normally, and this is kind of what I do in my wine serving experience, is serve the good stuff first, because I realize that a lot of times by, further in, people don't know what it tastes like. They're going to like anything. They might be drunk. But the interesting thing about Jesus is when he did that miracle, turn water into wine, he made this like amazing fine wine. I think they actually refer to it as fine wine. And that was at the end after they'd already served their like high quality stuff. And his was just like even better. So also, I found it interesting to hear that he made 120 gallons of wine for the wedding. And I was like, man, I don't know how big that wedding was, but like, I like a wedding that has 120 gallons of wine. I'm into it. Yeah. Count me in.
Well, it's so funny. Like when you talked about that, I have this like conundrum that I like live on a daily where I'm like, ooh, I love to save the best for last because I like to finish with like my favorite. But then so often I get to the point where I'm like, I'm not appreciating it and I'm not enjoying it. And I'm like, I should have just fucking had it first, but I didn't. I do it with sushi. I do it with wine. And I'm like, I never learn because I'm always like, no, but I want to finish with that perfect.
I know. Yeah. Well, that's what I think is so baller about that miracle is that Jesus wasn't like, you know what, I'll make like some subpar wine. He's like,
I'll make some shitty wine.
Yeah. He's like, I'm pretty much going to bring out the best shit right now. So, and then also we see things like throughout the New Testament, there are feasts and wine is regularly a part of those, again, celebratory feasts, all the way to the Last Supper, where we know that Jesus dined with the disciples and took bread and wine and said to the wine, like, this represents my blood, which is how we get into kind of some of the modern day communion stuff, which we'll talk about later.
I mean, modern day pairing too. Like, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Was he a genius at wine pairing? Maybe he was.
Yeah. I mean, probably. So I think that there's so much significance throughout the Old Testament and New Testament about wine. And what's up with the Protestants today is that it depends on kind of where you fall on the spectrum. A lot of people consider wine to be perfectly fine. I read a lot of articles about people being like, here's all the Bible verses that say I can drink wine. And then, Jesus might have been the very first ever sommelier. He was like, dude, I'm setting the precedent here for some good shit. But overall, there are also segments of religious communities today that don't consider drinking a part of their regular religion. So we've kind of come a long way from it being a necessity of life to kind of falling along different factions of belief systems. So anyway, enough about Jesus wine. Let's talk about some European monks.
Hell yeah, European monks. Well, do you love good French wine? Let me tell you who you have to thank. European monks. I think there's a joke in there about European, but I don't get it. Martin, maybe put something in the comments. Martin, I'm sure you've got a good European joke. But anyway, okay, so European monks kept winemaking alive during the Dark Ages. So Dark Ages come along, everyone's dying, oh my God. And European monks are like, guess what? We're going to keep wine going. So obviously during that time, it was kind of like a perfect confluence of like things happening at that time, which was, okay, water is shitty. So the only way to be able to have purified drinking abilities is through wine. So they would make wine, and it was replacing water. So one, that's happening at that time. Think about like the bubonic plague. Yes, go ahead. I'm here.
Along that line, there's a Bible verse that I think we posted on our Instagram.
Yes, go ahead, say it.
That I don't know it off the top of my head, but it was basically like serve wine. Don't serve water, but serve wine for your upset stomach.
It said, yeah, don't just drink water, like add a little wine for your stomach, for the sake of your stomach and ailments.
Yes, and it was probably a lot like this kind of wine where there's like a lot of living stuff in there. So
yeah, I'm sure it was, because it's not like they had modern like technology. So I'm sure it was really like kind of like rustic, really natural, as close to the like living process as possible. Also, like, it's funny because I think that there are a lot of hidden things in the Bible. I went to Catholic school till 8th grade, just so everybody knows.
We got cred. We got cred in wine. We got cred.
Got cred in Catholicism. But anyway, so it talks about like how you can't eat pork. Like, don't eat the animal that chews on its cud and like has a cleft hoof that's split. But what it really was talking about, even though it was saying that, and people took it to like an extreme, but it was really more that those animals tended to make people sick, and they weren't as clean as other animals. So it became this way to like, hey, like, let's just put it in there so people like can live longer. Yeah. Just these little Easter eggs. Anyway, okay, so speaking of water purification, drink wine, don't drink water. That's my theory. And then, like, you know, beyond Mexico and being very Catholic, there's also, let's see, Cloven. Yes, it was Cloven. So much of the Levitical laws are now backed by science. Yes. Okay, what? Science isn't real? Fuck science. Just kidding. Science is real. So Catholicism was the most prominent religion that was in Europe. And so you see different things like, okay, so one, water's bad. Two, Catholicism is the most prominent religion in Europe. And with Catholicism, like Caitlin talked about, the blood of Christ being something. And so because all of this is so intertwined, and like how Jesus described his like the wine that he gave his disciples was, this is my blood, drink from it, blah, blah, blah. But due to this intertwined nature, that is why monasteries got in the winemaking game. They're like, okay, well, we need wine because it's part of our ritual. And what do you know? Dark Ages, people are dying. Like, let's do wine so that people can live longer and not like be dying from this horrible water. And so it was just like all these things kind of came together at the same time. And, you know, Catholics rule Europe. So what was happening was that the rich people of the land were donating land to these churches. But the churches didn't know what to do with the land. They're like, okay, well, what are we going to do with this land? And they're like, I know what we'll do. We'll start growing. We'll start doing vineyards. And so they planted a bunch of vineyards on that land that was just given to them. And in case you're wondering who has a lot of time on their hands, it's monks. Like, monks have so much time on their hands. And you know who has a lot of time to do, like, when you're, you know, you're not doing all the
ladies
things. Wait, what were you going to say?
I said you're not chasing the ladies.
That's what I was going to say. When you're not having sex, what are you going to do? You know what? I'm going to devote my time and energy to wine. So anyway, so because they had all these things happen, it's like, okay, well, we need wine for our rituals. We have all this land. We have all this time. Like, it's perfect time to start like learning how to do this, start perfecting it. Like, I got nothing else to do. I'm going to start experimenting. And so because of that, they started experimenting. They started like really developing things that you see in modern day winemaking came from the monks. Mm-hmm. So, and not only that, but what was giving the monasteries their money was this wine. So it's like, not only would they use it for their own rituals, but they would sell it. And so it became like this cycle. It's like, okay, this is what's allowing us to do it. So like, let's keep putting energy into it. So then we're getting money back and making this whole thing. So it was just an evolution of wine. So really who you see making waves are the Benedictine monks. So the Benedictine monks were really in France and Germany. So if you like French champagne, you can thank the Benedictine monks. Do you like Riesling from Germany? You can thank the Benedictine monks. The most notable AOCs were developed by monks. So I'm going to name a few. Maybe you've heard of them, maybe you haven't. Who knows? But Chablis, started by the monks. Chasseneuil-Montrachet, started by the monks. Bossigny-Romigny, started by the monk. Puy-Foussay, started by the monks. Pomard, and we'll touch on it later, but Chateauneuf-du-Pape, the house of the Pope. So we have the monks to thank for all these things. And so some of the practices that came about from them, I'm going to touch on them. And one major monk who really is a big player in it, he's got a lot of folklore behind him. His name, maybe you've heard of him, Dom Perignon. Maybe you've heard of Champagne, Dom Perignon. There's a lot of myth behind him, but there's also a lot of stuff that he did really bring to the industry. And I mean, there's a phrase that he is coined with, like, oh, I'm tasting this, come quick, I'm tasting the stars. That never happened.
But it's so romantic.
And that never happened either. Like with making the champagne that we know now, didn't happen. So let's talk about what did happen, what cellar practices that he really brought about. He was the cellar master of Haute Viture, which is like a famous abbey, and which is actually credited with kind of like creating champagne. But champagne came from Europe or came from England, and we'll talk about that on a different episode. But what he did, because they had so much time to experiment, he was learning as he was going. The things that came from Dom Perignon that we still use today is harvesting during cooler times of the day. So when people harvest early in the morning and when people harvest in the evening, that came from him, as opposed to harvesting in the middle of the day when the grapes are kind of like not when you want to be having them in these bins holding there. You want them when they're cold. So that came from him. Sorting bad grapes out. He did that. He invented like the sorting table. Today's sorting table, Dom Perignon, we have to thank for that. Pruning in spring to avoid overproduction later in the season. He was the one who started that. Keeping vineyard pressing separate. So when you press wine, and not just like, okay, I press this wine. Okay, now I press this next wine and we're just going to put it all in the same barrel. He was the one who was like all about keeping them separate and then blending. And not only that, but gentle pressings. So lightly pushing the grapes rather than just like smashing them. Sometimes you want to smash it, but not when you're having champagne. Maybe afterwards you want to. Okay, Caitlin. So that's what I have to say about the fucking awesome monks. Tell me about how religion has taken hold in California, what it has to do with California.
Before I jump in, I will say, I feel like this whole episode, if it convinces you of nothing else, it's that we have religion to thank for wine in like every area. So I hope we're not dressing up in these silly outfits for nothing.
Wait, real quick. I have to pull this up.
Yeah.
Alan, you are 100% correct. So basically what you're saying is if we all stop trying to have sex and live like monks, we will change the world for better. We probably would, but who wants to do that?
I mean, I think that's called COVID-19 quarantining.
I mean, that is actually how this happened. Like, this wouldn't have happened if...
Yeah.
I kind of am living like a monk. Well, I'm living like a nun at the moment, but monks.
I also appreciated this comment. Just shout out to you, Britt, since you're also the lipstick queen. We had a discussion beforehand about whether or not she should wear lipstick. And I was like, you know what? That will make it more fun. So
it will make it. I felt like, okay, so I do have a little bit of hair trickling out, but you have like hair, so you still look normal. And I don't. Like, I'm just like, okay, I look like this bald person. I'm like, I got to do something. So.
I think it looks great, actually. I love it. You look so much more authentic. My hair's too crazy. I pinned it back and it's still unruly. It's like Medusa. So, okay. So let's talk about California.
I'm sure Medusa has something to do with wine too. We'll look into it.
I know, probably. Okay, so California. So this is where my shout out to anyone who's tuning in for Martin's Mexico watch party.
Hell yeah.
Basically, we have so many, also, if it's religion and immigrants to thank for wine in basically every capacity.
Yes.
So in 1697, Father Juan Ugarte, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, so please don't stop watching just because I can't speak Spanish. He led Jesuit priests into what is now Baja, California, aka
Baja. Shout out to Baja. Maybe you missed our episode. Go back and watch it on Baja.
Yeah. So basically, they went to there to plant wines for communion and also for consumption, for communion, and for other like religious reasons. And basically, this was the impetus for having wine vines, plantings, whatever, spreading to the rest of California through the mission system. So, you know, if you were a California elementary school kid, you probably did a mission.
Okay, what was your mission?
I don't know. You asked me that before. I don't remember.
Okay, I can't remember. Yeah. Well,
So,
I did your mission. Mine was Mission Solano.
Yeah, they were so, I remember like roughly that I made it out of like lasagna noodles, but honestly, I don't remember the mission. So that's a real travesty. But basically that's how wine spread throughout California, is because of immigrants moving up to the Baja and then spreading throughout. And then I just have a random slew of other things about the wine and how it got to the US in general. At one point, German Protestants who settled in the Midwest found that drinking wine provided a sense of camaraderie and festivity that bonded them as a Christian community. And I was like,
oh sounds familiar to right now.
Yeah. I was like, how is wine not bonding to whatever community you're in? It's pretty amazing like that. Also, this is cool. I did not know this. I was reading, I got real deep in the rabbit hole of like US history of wine and all kinds of stuff. Even Mormons at one point found that drinking wine produced altered moods, like similar to a religious fervor. And I was like,
I read that too. I was like, oh, Mormons, you guys acting like you're all better than everybody else. You the exact same.
So yeah, that was like early Mormonism. So I was like, wow. I mean, if you really think about it, wine does create camaraderie, community, feelings of religious fervor. I still think,
I mean, I'm having a religious experience right now.
Yeah, it's like, take me to church, you know, that's what we were singing earlier today. So, okay. I also loved this. In 1776, Ben Franklin, he wrote a letter to a like European economist, and he was talking about how he was musing about how the location of the elbow was proof that God desired us to drink wine, because his theory is if the elbow was any lower, then we wouldn't be able to reach our mouths. And if the elbow was any higher, then we wouldn't be able to reach our mouths.
Well, part of me is like, okay, we would have just gotten a glass that was appropriate. Like, I'll get a really long glass if I need to. Yeah. Like, we would have been able to eat Ben Franklin. Like,
I love it. I mean, he was being playful. He just said, let us adore and drink. And I was like, yes, let us adore and drink. But
amen, brother.
In case you need proof that you should drink wine, just look at the location of your elbow. It's perfect.
That's how you know God loves you.
Right? Yeah, that's what he said. Though I think he said wine was proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. Mm-hmm. Okay, so getting back to kind of early United States history on as far as wine goes. So we know that it was brought to California. That's how California got so big, because of the missions. But then we have the temperance movement, which is connected to prohibition, because there were, mostly from what I understand about the temperance movement, and Britt, you can add anything to this if you want, but there were a lot of, I think it was Irish immigrants who loved to drink, who were getting a little crazy, and a bunch of women who were like trying to defend themselves and their children from a bunch of drunk dudes, decided to start trying to prohibit people from drinking. And that was kind of how prohibition begun, was like the temperance movement, where people were like, okay, I'm sick and tired of like my drunk my
drunk uncle,
dad, husband, spending all of our money. I have all these kids. There probably wasn't such a thing as birth control at that point. I mean, definitely not the way we think of it today. So they're probably like got 12 kids at home, and then they're like drunk husbands spending all their money.
Coming home drunk, wanted to sleep with them and give them more kids. No, thank you.
Yeah. So they were like, we got to put a stop to this. We got to cut out the drinking. So that led into prohibition, which we all know about in the US. And it wasn't everywhere in the world, in case you didn't know. It was just the US. And religious wines were exempted from that. That was the only way that prohibition could be passed, like the actual clause could be passed, was that religious wines still were able to be produced, which honestly is probably what saved the wine industry in the US in general, is that all these religions and the Catholic Church, the Christian Church, the monks, whoever was making wine at the time, all the friars in the missions, they were able to make wine. So that's real, right? Why are you laughing at that?
Oh, I was laughing at Alan's comment.
Like, did I mess that up?
Just so everybody knows, I sit here and read the comments the entire time they're coming in. Even if I don't pull them up on your screen, they still make me laugh.
I know, and I'm always like, did I say something wrong? So basically, that is how Prohibition started, and we have religion to thank for continuing to have wine production. In many ways, it put the U.S. behind in the world of wine, and other places in the world as well, where there was similar kind of prohibitions. It put the world behind in wine production, but at least because we were able to have religious wine, that really helped a lot. And then, this was interesting. I was reading that some people even though religious wines were exempt from prohibition, I was reading that there was some religious groups that argued that they shouldn't have an exemption because in the Bible, when they talked about wine, they were not talking about fermented juice. They were only talking about grape juice.
See, okay, when I put in the thing, what's up with Protestants or whatever, that is actually what I was referring to, because I had read that they were people, or it was Methodist. It was one of the two. And I think you're going to touch on it because I saw your notes, but about the unfermented grape juice. And that's why I'm like, wait, what's the difference? Catholics actually have wine at their communions, but certain religions don't. And maybe you can tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I do want to talk about that as well. But to touch on what we were talking about, first of all, when you think about the way that making wine works, especially a wine like the one I'm drinking tonight, where that's all native yeast, basically all they had to do was pick the grapes, crush the grapes, let them sit for a short amount of time, and they got fermented grapes.
Oh, maybe you were in elementary school and your mom gave you some grapes to take to school, and oops, you left the bag at the bottom of your backpack and it smells like wine all of a sudden. I did that so many times where I'm like, oh my God, this bag. But now I'd be like,
that reminds me. I remember, this is like TMI probably, but I remember my dad dated this woman. She was actually quite charming. She was a nurse and she used to volunteer in the prison. And she would tell me how the prison inmates would save up all their fruit in their toilet bowls.
Go for that toilet hooch.
Yes, to make fermented. And I'm like, it does not take very long. So, okay, which brings me to my next point, which is, so after some Christians were arguing that no, the Bible was just referring to juice, like grape juice. They weren't referring to fermented stuff, which I'm like, yeah, right. How do they?
Yeah, right. Okay, let's talk about yeah, right, because it had to do with science. Like how our lovely viewer Lauren, who is also our producer, says oh, so much of it is based off science. It was because water couldn't be drank. So it had nothing to do with grape juice. You're liars, Well,
yeah, exactly. That, and also the fact that they probably couldn't even prevent it from fermenting. That's part of it. And then for helping your stomach, the fermentation is part of what helps your stomach.
It's not grape juice that's going to make your stomach feel better. Also, I wanted to say, Caitlin, and I didn't want to interrupt you, this whole show is TMI.
I mean, could you just imagine the wedding that Jesus was at when everyone was like, oh man, we ran out of plain grape juice. Darn. We need a lot of fine grape juice. It's like, no one was asking for fine grape juice. So, okay. Then I love this because there was this guy, he was a Methodist and he was like a Methodist minister turned dentist or dentist turned minister.
I was minister turned dentist.
Okay. Okay. So, which is funny anyway, for other reasons, it's funny that he was a dentist, but he made it basically his life goal in, I don't know, it was like I forget the time period actually. I'm sorry. 1869. So in 1869, this Methodist minister turned dentist, made it his personal goal to find a way to remove the alcohol quality from grape juice. And he basically formed the Welch Grape Juice Company.
His last name was Welch.
Yes, it was. So the Welch Company was born in 1869 out of a passion to serve God by helping his church to give its communion the fruit of the vine instead of
them from themselves.
The fruit of the vine instead of the cup of the devils.
Oh God.
But we're not doing a grape juice show here. We're doing a wine show.
Nope.
So that's all I got from California, the United States, all that stuff on prohibition. Thank you to all the people in missions for keeping the vines in practice.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about some examples of religious wines that still exist today and that we mentioned for you to bring to this episode. And we're going to talk a little bit about what those ones are. Caitlin's drinking one. Great choice. Actually, our producer Lauren has a great bottle that we're going to pull up of a Chateauneuf de Pop. So Chateauneuf de Pop, there it is. It is means the house of the Pope. And I love this wine because, so in case you're familiar with it, it's coming out of the Southern Rhone. Lauren, I'm going to add you to the stream. How does it taste? Tell me about it right now. What do you think?
It tastes delicious.
Oh, great. Okay. Great.
Okay.
Sweet.
No other words are necessary. So Chateauneuf de Pop is where a lot of the popes were. Like, actually, the Pope used to have his house out in France before it was in Italy, where in the Vatican, where we know and love it today. It was in, I'm gonna fuck it up, Avignon. Anyway, it's a region in France, in the Southern Rhone. And I love that I was reading, like, he chose his house because he wanted to get away from the sycophants. I bet the Pope had, like, women just crawling all over him. He's like, I need to get away from them. So anyway,
that's what's going to happen.
Is the wine that is coming out of that region. What were you saying?
Oh, I was going to say that's what's going to happen if I walk outside in this outfit.
I mean, half the people who are tuning into this episode are just like, really?
You let me out on.
Okay, Caitlin, tell me about another wine that I could find today that has to do with religion.
Okay, well, we kind of alluded to Pais, or the Mission Grape, or Lista Negro, and that is what I'm drinking today, which is a rosé style, which honestly I'd never had a quote unquote rosé of this grape before, but that is called the Mission Grape. My bottle of wine is actually called the Mission. Yeah. And that is because that is the grape that was planted in California or in Baja, when I talked about the missions planting grapes. This is the grape. So it is super well known. I mean, the thing is, a lot of people are not making high quality Mission grapes or Pais these days, but I actually quite love them if you can find them. So it can be really fun. I think Chile, they're trying to make that like their new staple grape.
Their flagship grape.
Yeah, keep an eye out for some Chilean Pais Mission grape. So yeah, that's one that I love. Yeah. What do you think? What else? What's next?
Okay, so Lacrima de Christi, the Tears of Christ. Maybe you've heard of it. I feel like there's so many religious wines in Italy because they're just like religious AF. But anyway, so what happened is how the story of this wine came out. I love it because Italy's just like totally propping themselves up in like so many ways. But maybe you knew that Lucifer was cast down from heaven. Well, maybe you didn't know that when he was cast down from heaven, he pulled a bit of heaven with him and it fell to earth. And you know what that is? It is the Gulf of Italy, which, what the fuck? Campania, which is what they consider Campania, it used to be a piece of heaven, which, I mean, if you've ever been there, I'm sure it is. I've never been there. But anyway, they're like, oh, when Jesus saw that his little piece of heaven, his little slice of heaven fell to earth, he cried because he was like, what? That's my piece. And where his tears fell were on Mount Vesuvius. And Mount Vesuvius had vines pop up on it. And wherever his tears fell, those vines are now Lacrima de Christi. And there is actually a DOC, which is a designated area for very specific wines, is dedicated. The DOC is called Lacrima Christi, and it has to do with the Tears of Christ. So if you guys can find the Tears of Christ, I want to know what it tastes like. I bought myself a bottle. I drank this one instead, but I did buy myself a bottle, so I can't wait to know what the Tears of Christ tastes like.
I want to drink it with you.
Okay, cool. We'll drink it together. I'll bring it.
Okay, yay. Okay, let's see what else. Oh, so one thing we wanted to talk about too is kosher wines. And it's a way bigger subject than we have time to cover today, but just to give you a heads up in case you'd never ever heard of kosher wines or thought about it. So kosher wine there's specific regulations for what can qualify a wine as kosher. And I should say many different levels of being kosher, but just for kind of a skimming religious wine episode level. Kosher wine can only be handled by religious Jews during winemaking. So that's different than other wines. Interestingly enough, oftentimes it's vegan because there are no animal-based additives allowed, which includes a lot of things that you wouldn't expect to even be a part of the winemaking process. But if you learn about the process, you learn there's a lot that has to do with like fish scales or like gelatin or eggs or things like that. So you can't have any of that when you're making the wine kosher. I did learn that it does not have to be blessed by a priest to be kosher. So I know that actually surprised me.
That surprises me too.
Yeah, I actually thought that was a thing. And I was thinking, I told Britt, like one time with one of my jobs at a supper club, I was asked to pair a full like 6-course meal with all kosher wines. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. Because honestly, it's very hard to find wines that are marked, at least for me at the time with little experience, it was hard to find wines that were marked as kosher. And luckily in San Diego, there was a big Jewish community in La Jolla. So there was a grocery store, I think it was like Rayleigh's or Ralph's up there, where there's like walls and walls of kosher wines. But the majority of them were from Israel, which is not necessary. It just kind of happened that way for that store. So there wasn't a lot of variety, but from what I've read, and we could do a whole episode on kosher wines from what I've read.
And maybe we will.
But it was pretty interesting because there wasn't a lot of variety at that time. There was only like Chardonnay and Cabernet, and it was kind of like basic and hard to pair for a full course meal. But I'd never had that challenge before, and it is possible. And kosher wine can be really interesting.
I love that you said that you thought it needed to be blessed by a priest, which I agreed with you. But then this lovely,
Yeah. I said priest, but that's
rabbi, which yes.
Yes.
You know, we're dressed as nuns. They're all priests to us at this point.
Yeah. Sorry, I did say priest, and I realized as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, that's not right. But yes, that's what I meant. It doesn't have to be blessed by a rabbi. Pardon me. It doesn't have to be blessed by a priest, but it does have to be blessed by a rabbi.
Wait, what? It doesn't have to be blessed by a priest? Shocking that priests have no say in kosher wine.
I know. Sorry, that's a preemptive corrective corner. I meant to say rabbi. Right.
Hey, let's finish. I'm all about correcting ourselves mid-episode. So let's do that because I don't want to have to remember this next week.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, I ain't remembering it.
So what about communion? Communion?
So let's talk about sacramental wines. In case you're wondering, me and Caitlin are from Sacramento, which actually is like for sacrament. So the sacrament of wine. So you probably will never see a sacramental wine on shelves. Like maybe you've looked for it. You ain't gonna find. It's like she found kosher wine. You're not finding sacramental wine on shelves because people aren't drinking sacramental wine at home like they're drinking kosher wine at home. Sacramental wine or altar wine is almost exclusively sold to churches. It is often sweet and fortified. Wines that would fit into this category are Angelica, Muscatel, Port, and Tokai. They anticipate that actually changing. So why they anticipate that changing is because it's typically the priests who are the ones who decide what sacramental wine is going to be. Good to know. Thanks, Mom. My mom's tuning in. Love you, Mom. By the way, this is Britt's mom, not Brian. Oh, Mom. My mom tunes into all my episodes. She's so good.
Leave it to Nancy to correct us on some communion. Oh, wait, no, on some Jewish wine.
I know. My mom is Catholic, and she's correcting us on Jewish wine.
We should hire her.
Anyway. But they expect, like, kind of that the wines, the altar wines are going to change as the changing generation of priests happen. So old people, they like sweet wines. Maybe you've had one of your grandpa's wines. It was sweet. It was fortified. It might have been port. Maybe your grandpa really loved White Zinfandel like mine did. But they expect the wine industry for sacramental wine to start changing to the drier side, as obviously all of them are. Yes, go ahead.
Also, aren't those almost all whites that you just named? Like Muscatel and
Angelica is not, and Port is not, but Muscatel is, and Tokai is.
I know.
I have no idea. And they spelled Tokai weird, so I was like, maybe, I don't know.
Also, so growing up Christian, I never. We were like the Welch grape juice.
You're the Welch. You were the Welch communioners.
We were like the Welch and wafer crackers. So I never took communion with real wine until I was in college, and I went to this like Franciscan monk, the Center for Action and Contemplation, which is still pretty badass if you ask me. But it was
I love their name.
Yeah. Also, it was a conference, but Anne Lamott spoke there, and so did
Hell yeah, Anne Lamott.
what's his name? My Franciscan monk man.
Friend.
I wanted to say friend, but he doesn't know me. But he's amazing. And
but I feel like I know him.
I know. I feel like I know him. But we read or we did communion, and I remember I had no idea actually how to do it, because it was like, first of all, in the Christian church, well, I didn't know that, but
all the ways.
I didn't know. In the Christian church, you go up and you either like get a cracker, or if you're like a fancy church, you have like a loaf of sourdough and you like rip a piece off, and then you go dip it in the Welch.
Knows what's up.
Yeah, exactly. You dip it in like the Welch grape juice. But no, this one was like, you just get in line and then you just get there and you're like, oh gosh, what do I do? I guess I just open my mouth, and we drank off the cup and they like wiped it off.
COVID times, that ain't happening no more.
But it was real wine, and I was like, damn, this is fancy. I like this.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I went to Catholic school, obviously, and I did have a first communion, and you know what? I got a picture of that first communion.
Oh my God.
She's so cute. And look at that great posture. I have great posture.
You do have good posture, and you've got a great side profile. That's so
thank you. I know. I think my side profile is better than my front, I'll be honest. I should just start doing the episodes from the side. Let me tell you.
So good. Oh, I love it.
Anyway, so yes, I've been drinking since I was young, so I know all about it. But anyway, in case you guys were wondering, sacramental wine, altar wine, had its heyday during Prohibition. Shocker, like Caitlin mentioned. So what happened is all these churches started popping up over throughout the U.S. because they're like, oh, we could still drink wine. Oh, we're all of a sudden a church community.
It's for that religious fervor that we talked about.
I mean, I'm feeling the Holy Spirit at the moment. The Holy Spirits.
Amen.
So yes, sacramental wine had its heyday during Prohibition, and it's still great today. Anyway, that's all I have to say about religious wine. Oh wow,
Lauren, asked Mom for grape juice.
She should have been doing this episode.
I asked Mom for grape juice and sourdough bread for my birthday party once. Wow, we are like a seriously religious family.
I mean, yeah, Catholics are like well, whatever. I can't speak for all Catholics. I can only speak for myself. We went on Easter, we went on Christmas, and maybe a few times in between just so we could get credit because we went to a Catholic school.
Well, apparently we required everybody to take communion before they came to Lauren's birthday party. So.
Yes, Lauren. We bless your birthday.
Real deal.
Well, when you do take communion, you walk up like this, and then you open your hands, and you can have them put it in it, and then yes.
Oh,
or you can open your mouth and they put it right in it. But every time you do the wine, you have to drink it.
I like how you put your tongue out. Is that like necessary for getting?
Well, it's so that they can put it on your tongue and they don't have to like try to fit it in your mouth. It's like, I mean, I don't want to play like air hockey to try to get this crust like in your mouth, this wafer. Put it on my tongue. Okay, Caitlin, I think that's enough of religion. I want to hear what you want to listen to. I was also thinking about this a little bit. I really don't feel like we should say, what do you want to listen to when you're drinking this wine? It should be, what do you want to dance to when you're drinking this wine? That should be like our new segment. So anyway, what do you want to dance to when you're drinking your wine?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because I listened to this song.
I thought you'd never ask Britt the fake nun.
I listened to the song. Whoa, what happened?
It kept falling off.
I listened to this song like 5 times today. I'm not joking though. The first time I like started crying because I was like, oh my gosh, I think we might have a video too. Is the video on?
It's so quiet.
Yeah. I don't know what's happening with the choppiness, but
Maybe it's copyrighted. And they just go like, oh, Whoopi, you gotta love Whoopi. Oh my goodness.
oh my gosh, I don't know what is happening with this version of it. It's not doing it justice. But honestly, this is it. You got to listen because Lauryn Hill, I forgot how much I love
I know.
her.
Lauryn Hill. Hill, yeah.
Hill, yeah, to the Lauryn Hill crew. I mean,
Lauryn Hill, yeah. Okay, let's just sing it. Okay.
I mean,
joyful, joyful, oh, we adore thee.
Yeah,
God of power, God of light.
Go for it.
Something
full like flowers before. I don't know.
Fill us with the light of day. Okay.
Light of day.
Light of day.
I like the rap part.
Yeah, you know me. I love the rap part. The rap part's the best part.
I wanted to play the rap part, but like out of context, it doesn't make as much sense. It was like, are you down with G.O.D.?
Yeah, you know me.
It's so good. I love it. So that's what I want to listen to. I mean, I already did listen to it like 5 times today and got a little teary-eyed.
Okay, well, let's hope that Lauren can turn up the volume for the next one. Like maybe we can figure that out, but maybe we can't.
Maybe that was my fault. It might have been like bad quality.
Okay. I mean, I just chose a great quality one. So this is what I did. And Caitlin, I don't know if you were in this dance in high school, but they did wear preacher like choir costume. So let's see if it plays.
I used to smoke. I used to drink. I used to smoke, drink. I used to smoke and drink. Smoke and drink and dance the hoochie coo. Oh yeah.
Oh.
Okay, it's like not doing great. It'll turn off on its own. But I'll sing it to y'all. It goes, I used to smoke, I used to drink, I used to smoke and drink and dance the hoochie coo. But now I'm standing on the corner praying for me and you because I'm saved. Yes, exactly. Anyway, that's a bummer. I wish our songs, I'm like, it's okay. We'll just dance to it on our own.
I wonder why.
Anyway.
We got to figure that shit out.
Yeah.
So what do you want to eat with your wine?
Oh my God. I honestly didn't think about that. So maybe you could go first.
I didn't think about it either, but I'm starving. And I will just say that earlier today, I'm not at my own house. You might have noticed. I saw some frozen Trader Joe's corn dogs in the freezer.
And you're like, this would go perfect with this wine. Okay. I want to have a holy wafer with my wine. I hope that you spit out your wine or snorted it or something. But yeah, I feel like I could go for some communion right now.
I almost spit my wine out. That was so good. Also, I feel like we just look like pilgrims now.
I thought you looked like a pilgrim a lot of the episode.
Well,
pilgrim no more.
I had fantasies of like taking our robes off, like the people in Sister Act during that finale, and just like dancing at the end. But I don't think I can get this thing off.
I know. Mine was a turtleneck, so I just like, I'm
pretty sure I'm stuck in this until I can have some assistance on getting out of it.
I'll help you.
Okay, great.
I volunteer as tribute.
You'll be here tomorrow, so I'll see you tomorrow to take it off.
Yes. All right. Okay. Tell me what's happening next week.
Okay, so I'm really excited about next week because for those of you who have tuned in for a while and our loyal listeners, first of all, thank you. We have big plans for you. Stay tuned in.
Oh my God. Okay, really quick. Logan Struck. Yes. Keep the costume for Thanksgiving episode.
That's so good.
Suggestion. Thank you for the suggestion.
So good. I love it. Okay, so I'm super excited. So for those of you who have tuned in for a long time, Britt and I, we decided to do this project, and then like a week later, we released a trial episode.
I love me and you are like, we have a bias for action. We literally were like, let's do this. Okay, how about we film an episode next week? It's like, okay.
You have a bias for action. I have a love for you, so it works out. Also, if you post any photos of this while you look super hot and I look like a pilgrim.
Oh, I will not. Only nun photos go on this episode.
Okay.
I am the person who pulls the stills, and I think that I do myself justice.
Yeah, you do. But if you do this, I will murder you.
No, it will only be nun photos. There will be nun photos will make it of this.
Okay, so what we did when we released our sort of trial episode is we sent it to some of our close friends who we thought would give us real, honest feedback. And we covered the topic of Beaujolais. And we got the feedback back that a lot of our friends were like, we don't know what the hell that means. And we had so much fun doing it, but we're like, you know what? That's a really good point. It's a little early to jump into Beaujolais when nobody knows what that means. But now we are like 20 episodes in. I don't know the exact number, but we're going to jump into Beaujolais.
Beaujolais all day, bro.
Beaujolais is a region. The wines are amazing. You will love them. We love them. And so if you're looking for
my fuck wines.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're looking for a wine and you go to a wine shop, ask them for a wine from Beaujolais. The grape is Gamay. So if they don't understand what Beaujolais means.
And if you also can't find a Beaujolais and you find a Gamay, do it. Like, get that. Like, go for it.
Yeah. So don't worry. We're going to post on how to help you find this wine. We're going to talk about this region. It's one of our favorites. It's kind of perfect timing because we're getting ready to gear up for some Thanksgiving wines.
I know. And if you were wondering, the best wine for Thanksgiving, it is Gamay. Oh, and it's like right around Nouveau Day. Like Nouveau Day is like a little bit later, but still.
Right, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
We'll definitely talk about it.
Yeah.
So Gamay all day. Yes, that's true. Gamay all day. We love yes, and. So that's next week. We hope you'll be here. We hope you will bring a wine. We hope you'll start a watch party. We hope we won't be dressed like
invite your friends, because I mean, we love doing this for you guys, but we'd love to do it for more people.
I would love to not do this for more people.
And okay, if you guys are like just like can't get enough of In Poor Taste, which I mean, who can? Follow us throughout the week at our Instagram, inpoortaste_wine. We put out some great content. We're gonna put out even better content when we have time. Anyway, so that's how you can follow us throughout the week. See, maybe you missed an episode, maybe whatever. 20 episodes? Yes! Okay, I mean, there are 52 weeks a year, and we're almost like halfway through the year.
Oh my gosh. We're so cool.
We're so cool. Okay. That's enough of tooting our own horn.
Yeah. But anyway, Beaujolais next week. We can't wait. We love Beaujolais. Get yourself a bottle.
I already have my bottle. Do you?
No, I don't. And I also need to get some bottles for some other folks too. So I'll be going shopping. So
okay. Cool.
All right, everyone.
All right, everybody.
Stay thirsty.
Stay thirsty.
Woo!
I'm just gonna dance, and everyone will think they can't hear the song.
Oh yeah, dance like
there it is. There it is. No,
you hear it?
No. Ooh, take it off, girl. Take off that monk uniform.
That's what I'm gonna do. It's called a nun.
I feel like you're gonna do it like sultry while the outro music is happening.
I am. I'm gonna do it while the outro music's happening.
No, it's really coming off. Yeah, girl. Yeah, girl. Get it.
Freedom.
Oh, this was a great episode. One of my favorites. And I feel like I say that every week, but you know what? This was the one.
This is the one. Aren't you glad I had clothes under there?
Yes. Actually, no.
It's like after our other costume outfit where we're like, get this off of me.
That's our debrief costume.